On September 12th, the United Nations Security Council adopted yet another resolution with yet another set of sanctions to be imposed on North Korea. But critics are arguing now there isn't much stuff in that resolution because fundamentally, China does not want to pressure North Korea. Then question comes, what is it that China really wants from North Korea in current dynamics of North Korean nuclear crisis? That is the question we want to ask right here in this program, Upfront.
Controversy is brewing over THAAD, or the U.S.-made Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System. In the aftermath of Pyongyang's 6th nuclear test and repeated missile provocations, Seoul and Washington saw eye to eye that a temporary deployment of THAAD could no longer be delayed. On September 9th, the 4 remaining THAAD launchers were installed at the U.S. base in Seongju, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, where 2 launchers have been already operational. In a written statement to the public, President Moon Jae-in explained that the temporary deployment was the best decision his government could make at this point to ensure the safety of the Korean people. He added that a final decision about the fate of the system would come after environmental reviews. China, which has long opposed the deployment of the defense system, immediately slammed Seoul's move. Beijing's foreign ministry summoned the South Korean ambassador to lodge a strong complaint and voiced its discontent during a regular press briefing. China has taken a string of economic retaliatory measures against South Korea in the wake of Seoul's decision to deploy the THAAD system last year. Among them include suspension orders for Korean businesses in China due to alleged safety problems and a ban on selling group tour packages to South Korea. 23% of Korean businesses in China recorded deficits during the first half of this year, and the number of Chinese tourists to Korea during the same period dropped by 41% compared to a year earlier. While China's retaliatory measures are taking a direct hit on the South Korean economy, many show concerns that the level of retaliation will only increase with the latest deployment of additional launchers. On this week's Upfront, we're joined by foreign affairs and national security experts from Korea and the U.S. to delve into the competing interests of neighboring countries over the recent THAAD deployment.
For today's discussion, we have 2 guests in studio. Dean Cheng, he's a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation joining us. Thank you very much, Dean.
Thank you for having me.
And we have Dr. Lee Seong-hyon. He is a research fellow at Sejong Institute joining us here as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Lee, let's talk about the China's THAAD retaliation. That has been going on for quite some time.
Right.
And our foreign audience who are joining us here may wonder what the stories are, even though it's very well known here in Korea. So can you offer us a kind of like scene setter for our discussion in terms of what's been happening, and especially lately in terms of how China is retaliating against South Korea on THAAD issue?
Yes, after South Korea decided to deploy the advanced missile defense system in South Korea, China has been retaliating South Korea in a number of ways. Some are specific and some are in general. Specific to companies like Lotte. Lotte is like a J.C. Penney in South Korea.
Big retailer.
Yes.
Right.
But it also has a huge presence in China. But more than 80% of Lotte, they were shut down. In
their stores?
Yeah, their stores shut down. And they come to Lotte and they say, oh, you have a safety issue. You need to shut down for 1 month. I'll come back in 1 month and we'll do the re-inspection again. So after 1 month, oh, you still have some other problems. You shut down 1 more month.
Right.
So they keep this kind of uncertainty, psychological uncertainty there.
Lotte is not the only one that's suffering.
Hyundai Motors,
E-Mart, another retailer, has decided to pull out, actually.
Right.
And before then, we have tourism industry that's been
tourism
affected
industry.
big time.
Chinese government is discouraging Chinese people coming to South Korea, and they're also blocking the what I call the dissociation of people between the South Korea and China by blocking the South Korean cultural products,
like a TV drama,
Korean singers, and China. they also they're very clever that in a way that they're using a they don't say the government is doing this.
Right.
But we know the government is doing behind this. So they are mobilizing people, stoking their patriotism.
And now even automaker Hyundai is suffering big time. And
Hyundai's first 6 months sales dropped more than 40%.
Right.
So the situation is getting very serious.
Dean, we have a question about what's being known in the United States about this, what we want to call abuse, retaliation. How well known is this in the United States and the worldwide in terms of what China is doing to us?
Well, you're absolutely right. This is a very important issue. What we are seeing are things like weaponized tourism, where China uses its tourists as a trade weapon. It's doing that against South Korea. It's done that against Taiwan and also the Philippines. Throughout Asia, I think this is fairly well known. The problem is that in the United States, other than those of us who focus on Asia, more broadly the impact is not very clear. And when you go to Europe, I think the understanding is even less.
The message is here, the retailers, right? You have retailers in the United States. Europeans have their own retailers who are interested in doing business in China. An automaker like Hyundai, there are automakers everywhere in the United States and Europe. Don't you think they should know better about what actually happens in China when there's something that goes wrong on the political side?
Absolutely. They should understand this better, but especially for companies, very few of them look at that broader issue of political risk, which is what we're really talking about here. They do the projections. They say, is China going to have growing or shrinking demand for vehicles, without thinking about how the Chinese government regularly interferes in that market, whether it's tourists, whether it's purchasing cars, or whether it's what department stores being open. So yes, I think that the Republic of Korea needs to get this message out as a warning. You are, in a sense, the canary in the coal mine. You are the first precursor to say, look at what China is doing to us. You in Europe, you in the United States need to understand this will be you next.
Dr. Lee, do you think this is setting a good example for Beijing so that they can build a basis, power basis around the world, their neighbors, setting South Korea as an example? If you behave against our Beijing's interest, you're going to get hurt. Do you think it's working out well for Beijing's interest?
Well, this is a good question. The reason that THAAD issue is very difficult to resolve at this moment is that it's not just because South Korea-China issue, but China frames this issue as a rivalry between United States and China, power rivalry. In the past, countries like South Korea, Singapore, Australia, they rely on China for economy. They rely on United States for security. But as China becomes powerful and stronger, they are telling South Korea, you either choose China or you choose United States. That's the one case. So China is sending out a very public signal. Look, a U.S. ally like South Korea is taking side with the United States, and we are punishing, and U.S. is not doing anything to protect its friend, its ally. And I think it's bad for China, but I think there is some cost of legitimacy and the soft power, and also U.S. leadership in the world, because there are other countries that are closely watching this situation. Whether U.S. protects its ally, whether U.S. cares about its ally, when South Korea is being bullied by China, I think U.S. credibility is at stake. So I hope that Donald Trump, he should send out a tweet. If you violate my friend, if you violate my ally, that is same as violating me. I think that should be a very clear signal, but I haven't seen that. More like, Xi Jinping said that China opposes U.S. deployment of THAAD in South Korea. China opposes U.S. deployment.
But they're beating up South Korea.
Because South Korea is a small, weaker ally partners, so they are not revenging against the United States. But the U.S., for some interesting reasons that I cannot understand, more like a sitting back and watch the game. I don't think that is not the responsible world power is supposed to. I think I look forward to reading Donald Trump's tweet about this.
You're not speaking for Donald Trump, but I think we need some words, responsible words from U.S. side here.
Well, here is the issue, that when Donald Trump tweets, everyone gets nervous. And so when he tweets something that some people like, other people inevitably say, I can't believe he said something so aggressive, so assertive. When he is soft and responsible, you then hear, oh, he's not being assertive enough. So this is the Goldilocks problem. How can I have just right temperature for today's congee?
And you can't really expect that proper balance from the current White House. That's what you're suggesting, I guess. Dr. Lee, critics are saying, the hawks in Korea are saying, in order to avoid a situation where North Korea freezes their nuclear development and asks for the withdrawal of troops or reduction of joint exercise, because that exchange is unfair, some people are saying we need to have nuclear weapons too. We need to have nuclear weapons in order to denuclearize together in Korean Peninsula. How do you evaluate that argument?
Well, I think South Korea announced that it's not going to have nuclear weapons, and the goal is denuclearization of not just South Korea but entire, Korean Peninsula. So when South Korea decides to have nukes, that goes against long time our principle. But then I think the situation has changed. North Korea now has workable nuclear weapons, and South Korea must have at least have this very robust public discussion. Whether it materialized, end up having real nuclear weapons is the next issue. But then at least it could add some pressure on China to act more, because China so far has been not very, even the current, the latest UN sanctions, I see that as a very disappointing. Because when you look at evaluations, every sanction is a new sanction. There is some incremental improvement. But then when you evaluate sanctions, you should evaluate based on what the U.S. wanted to accomplish.
Right.
That is a complete embargo of oil.
Yeah.
Not happened. Sanctioning, blacklisting Kim Jong-un didn't happen.
Right.
So U.S. did not accomplish its goal, but that was what China watered down the sanction. So actually, it's I see this as China's very clever success, and China has achieved this success for the last 10 years of negotiation nuclear weapons against about North Korea.
Right.
So I think maybe we need to play a plan B, that is a possibility of thinking about having South Korea having nuclear weapons. And I think, Dean, you should tell Trump administration that we have the right, and also we need to self-defense, we need to have nukes.
Right.
Well, I think that any time a country takes an entire set of options off the table, you are sending a signal to your adversary that they have to worry about fewer possibilities. Here, it's not just Pyongyang, but it's also Beijing. That being said, any decision like this is ultimately the sovereign decision of South Korea. What I'm saying is that by saying you will never choose the nuclear option, you are signaling Pyongyang and Beijing, I don't have to worry about South Korea choosing that path.
That has been the problem the whole time.
That has been one of the major problems.
Right,
and so
people say.
That is exactly why I think that you need to have the debate. At the end of the day, whether you choose to nuclearize is not really in the hands of the United States.
Okay.
I think we could frame it this way. We tried every possible options.
Right.
And now we don't like it, but for self-protection of South Korea, and given the grave situation, we have to choose what we don't like to choose, that is going nuclear.
Interesting, very interesting. Let's ask some questions to an expert in China, whom we are connecting online here. He's a Dr. Zhao Tong. He is at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center for Global Policy. Okay, first question.
Okay.
About THAAD. Some people here in Korea are asking this question. THAAD is basically U.S. missile defense, and it's a U.S. system. And people are asking this question, why is China pressing and giving so much hard time to South Korea? How would you respond to that question?
China believes that the U.S. has every intention to undermine China's core security interests in deploying THAAD. if China thinks that the U.S. does not intend to harm China, maybe China and the United States could work something out to have a mutual agreement that's acceptable to both parties. But if China really believes that the U.S. is deliberately aiming at undermining Chinese interests, I don't think China is confident that it can talk the United States out of the deployment. So from the Chinese perspective, there is no utility to even try to raise this issue to protest against the United States, because that's the American intention from the very beginning. However, from the Chinese perspective, South Korea is in a different situation. South Korea is a neutral country in this debate. South Korea has much less stake in this game. China believes that THAAD cannot really help protect South Korea, and therefore South Korea has much less to lose if THAAD is not deployed. South Korea might need to depend on China to some extent to help address the North Korean nuclear crisis. China is a major regional power right next to South Korea. So China is a country that South Korea cannot ignore, either at present or in the future. So South Korea has to take Chinese interests into its consideration. So I think that's the Chinese thinking.
I see. China has been consistently saying that we have to resolve this situation through dialogue. So what kind of dialogue are we talking about here, and how can it actually resolve the situation here?
More economic sanctions will only increase North Korea's threat perception, and therefore will only encourage North Korea to further invest into its nuclear programs. China is very reluctant to impose the so-called crippling sanctions that could threaten the stability of the regime. I think there are many concerns to do so. One is that facing the danger of regime collapse, and in that very desperate situation, the North Korean government can choose to be even more provocative and even more aggressive, enhancing its military threats to targets in South Korea, Japan, Guam, and even the homeland of the United States. How the international community is going to deal with that, I don't think even the United States has a good strategy to respond to that situation. So it's a very risky scenario and could lead to a potential military conflict. So China is very concerned about that. And also, as China imposes more economic pressure on North Korea, China runs the risk of making North Korea a nuclear-armed enemy of China. So China is taking an increasingly higher security price for putting pressure on North Korea. I think that's another reason China is very reluctant to corner the regime. And that's something the international community does not fully appreciate.
Dr. Lee, the second point that he made first, he says China cannot make the economic sanctions crippling. When economic sanctions are not crippling, how could it work?
Chinese basically think that sanctions are not the way to solve this issue because this is a very complicated issue. Mm-hmm. When sanctions are hard enough, mm-hmm. stringent enough, mm-hmm. then cornered North Korea mm-hmm. will turn around mm-hmm. and bite back, and Beijing? Probably they'll bite Beijing. So Beijing, this may not be very realistic thinking, but Beijing worries about this situation. So they think that we don't have to make North Korea turn around and become our enemy. Okay. When North Korea and China, we are both facing our common adversary, that is main adversary, that is United States. So there is a joke in China that North Korea, as you know, in Chinese called Chaoshan, and China is Da Chaoshan. That is China is a big North Korea. So there is some ideological affinity of coming from socialism, big brother and little brother, coming facing the common adversary that is the United States. I think China is already, their thinking is already thinking about this big game, power rivalry between the United States and China. And coming to THAAD, going back to, they are afraid that, THAAD is not just about South Korea protecting itself. It's a start of a U.S. military defense system, starting from South Korea and then Vietnam or probably Taiwan.
Encircling China.
Encircling China. So that is the big strategy coming from Washington to contain the rise of China. So this is a deep suspicion. That's why Zhao Tong just keep mentioning about U.S. intentions. They don't trust U.S. intentions.
I see. About Dr. Zhao Tong's point, he called South Korea is a neutral country in THAAD debate. And South Korea does not have as much at stake here. The THAAD cannot really protect South Korea. Your reaction?
What I would say to all of that is this is a sign of how much China fundamentally disrespects South Korea. When you
disrespect.
Disrespect. Because when you make up things that are so transparently wrong and silly, it means I am not even going to try to say something that is face-saving for both of us. I am just going to make up things that are just nonsense. The idea that this missile defense system, which is one of the most advanced in the world, won't protect South Korea, won't protect South Korea from North Korea. If it won't protect it from North Korea, China, which has more missiles, why does China feel threatened?
Yeah,
this is like saying, oh, this won't even protect you from a level 1 threat, but we have a level 4 threat. We are terrified of this capability. This is what I'm saying. I mean, you show me no respect when you make your lies so transparent.
Very strong statement, Fred. We're so glad to have you on the show, making it so interesting. But your point is very, very clear there. Now, what's happening these days? What should happen? What's the proper balance between this completely two completely different kind of perspective?
I think there was time that we enjoyed talking about the world is G2.
Yeah.
China and the United States cooperating together, leading the world, global leadership.
Right.
But I think now we are entering G0. U.S. is not playing traditional role of global leadership. China is not mature enough to replace the U.S. leadership. So we are entering a very turbulent period of a leaderless period. And I get this question a lot, what South Korea should do, what South strategy should be about between the two big powers.
Right.
And I think South Korea, there is a saying in Chinese that, 如果没有外交, that is that a weak country doesn't have room for diplomacy. No matter what kind of great idea, tricks, strategy you have, if your national strength is weak.
Here, weak means hard power, right?
Hard power.
Military and economy.
Yes.
Right.
Hard power. When you don't have power, your strategy would not work because the powerful neighbors, big players, they don't take you seriously, including THAAD. THAAD did not play out the way we hope to see it. So I think South Korea, thinking about good strategy is important, but they're also thinking about, building up national strength, teamwork. South Korea too divided, left and right ideologically, but cooperate national building, national harmony, strengthening economy as well.
Right.
I think these are very important. And when you become strong inside, when you become strong outside as well.
Your response to his point, with particular reference to his idea about having the need to gain our own hard power. To what extent is situation changing in terms of thinking in Washington?
I think Washington wants to see South Korea be stronger in terms of hard power and be more
nuclear
capable.
Power too?
I think nuclear power is something that is very new to the debate. I think that it is something that is a new factor that is still being discussed. I don't think there is a set policy. But I think that at the end of the day, if South Korea coordinates with the U.S. on this issue, I don't think it is necessarily a game changer like it was in the past. That being said, South Korea is already part of the G20, part of the OECD, part of the countries that gives aid to others. At this point, you have a defense budget as larger than many NATO countries. So you have many of the elements of hard power. I think it is a matter of bringing it together.
How to harness them.
And to bring it and to move forward from there.
Okay. Wonderful point. Dr. Lee, and it's all thanks to your wonderful insights, and all thanks to your wonderful insight as well, Dean Cheng from Heritage Institution. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We want to also thank our viewers for having joined us, and as you have learned all this interesting debate and perspective here today, we want to ask you to join us again next time when we discuss all these issues that matter for Korea as well as the world. And until then, this has been Kim Byung-jun. Thank you very much.